Good morning, Congressman, sir.
Good morning, Vera, and thanks for having me on, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, peace and blessings. Well, it's really on now because we are here in the year 2010, and the primary election is in May. And
yes,
so the campaign is full speed ahead.
It definitely is. I began at 5:30 a.m. yesterday morning, Monday morning, and began a series of kitchen calls. I call them kitchen calls as I'm running against Arlen Specter, as you know, for the Senate nomination in the Democratic Party. Because when I was in the military over those 31 years as captain of a ship, I'd sit down with my sailors, and I'd say, what's on your mind? And then I'd tell them how I wanted to take the command forward. And so we're just headed up down to Bucks County. This morning I was in Philadelphia, headed on up to Lehigh, and now I'm headed on down to Bucks County. And I'm really looking forward to this primary.
Now, Congressman, even as you are running for U.S. Senate, you are still a congressman, so that means you've got to, juggle your schedule. I guess you and your scheduler have to be like magicians to make all of this fit and work.
Mention that it's me and three of my schedulers, one in the campaign, one in the district office, and one down in Washington, D.C. And what an important time for our country. That's actually why I'm running. But, here, if I could, and I hope we're talking about the health care bill coming up because, boy, is it going to affect Philadelphia region. But I also want to make sure that you and everybody understands why I'm running. If there's anything that ails Pennsylvania and this nation, even more than the economy, even more than health care crisis, and they are crises, it is the lack of trust that people feel towards Washington, D.C., that they've let them down. And as I run against Arlen Specter, while I do respect him, I want everyone to know that restoring accountability, we are willing to be responsible and letting people know where you stand and willing to be accountable for that. And where Arlen, and all I respect him, would switch a party after helping with George Bush run our economy aground and try to become a Democrat, I frankly think the Democratic establishment has to believe that we've got someone who believes in democratic principles that can do better than that. And I promise everyone every day to work hard, energetically, and with the greatest of honesty, like I did in my district, where we keep our office open 7 days a week and have handled 3 times the constituent caseload where people are hurting than the average congressional office. And that, Vera, is why I am running.
But, Congressman, 7 days a week, that's unheard of. I don't think there's ever been a congressman from Pennsylvania that's done anything like that before, at least not to my knowledge.
Vera, I know, and sometimes people look askance, but how could I ever have someone come in my office or try to when they're working 8 to 5, try to call at night, or I'll come in on the weekend, have a closed office when a woman came in with cervical cancer and said her insurance company had denied her the type of chemotherapy her doctor said, or a couple who came in with a son with stunted growth and said their insurance company denied him the hormone treatment to grow, or the vet that called and couldn't get into the hospice at the VA. There's no one I want to help more than the working family. I owe this nation a debt. Yes, I served 31 years in the U.S. Navy. I loved it. When my 4-year-old was struck with brain tumor, the same brain cancer that Senator Kennedy had, this nation, Pennsylvanians were there with the health care plan the military had, and I owe it every day to pay back that debt. And when I was asked by the Democratic Party initially in February to run against Arlen Specter when he was a Republican, I said I'd like a little more time with my daughter, and we're working pretty hard as it is. They insisted, and in April I agreed, but then Arlen became a Democrat.
And then they flipped on you.
And what?
The Democrats, the party, did they do a flip on you?
Very much so. I was then called and said, sit down, please. Arlen has changed. And, my thing is in the Navy, when someone runs a ship aground, as a Republican leadership of which he gave 2,000 votes to President Bush and voted for the tax cuts, 53% of which went to the top 1% of wage earners, the millionaires of Pennsylvania, and not to the working family or the lower income, I said, no, I won't sit down. The stakes are too high. I'll never back down. And so, therefore, I am running. And I'm running, and I promise, just like I work for my sailors, just like this debt that I owe everyone every day for my daughter's health, I promise to work for the middle class, the lower income, those who are truly the engine of our economy, and those who have been disenfranchised and can be all they can be if we give them the opportunity. And I think, as much as I respect Arlen, that when he voted to permit Wall Street to have no regulation on derivatives, that they gambled with our savings, where he voted to ship jobs overseas by letting companies that ship jobs overseas keep the profits overseas and not bring them home to be taxed, except when they want to, that while I respect him, he and I disagree. Arlen's politics have failed Pennsylvania, and I don't believe that someone who helped get us into this mess should be asked to help get us out of it. The stakes are just too high, Fira.
I am so glad that you shared with us this morning about how the whole process began, and that's something that somehow I missed in my past chats with you or whatever. I did not realize that the Democratic Party actually came to you and said, hey, we think you're awesome. You need to run against Arlen Specter, while he was a Republican. And then when he decided to switch over back to the Democratic Party, then the Democratic Party said, oh, well, now that Arlen's going to be on our team, we don't need you to run Sestak. We'll go with Arlen. That just doesn't seem quite right to me, and that leaves a funny taste in my mouth.
When Senator Menendez, head of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee that recruits candidates to run against Republican senators, asked me to run in February, I told him, you hadn't heard I was interested. He said no, but we'd like you to. And then you're right. After I agreed, because I looked at it and said, all right, I can do it, this duty. But, yes, what I was most taken aback with is I then went around, when I was asked not to run, the 67 counties of Pennsylvania, and saw how much people were hurt. And as one individual said to me when I asked how the recession was, he said, it's not too bad. I was already hurting so much anyway before. And then when I was called and said, look, we don't want you to run, I said, wait a minute. This deal that was done by the Democratic establishment, in Pennsylvania and Washington, D.C., this is what most sours people on our politicians, is that they really believe it is about them. Look, I respect Arlen, but the fact of the matter is, as he said, he left the Republican Party because he could not win the Republican primary, and he said, I don't want my legacy to be determined by it. Well, wait a minute. This isn't about legacies. This is about the young child in Philadelphia growing up. What type of educational opportunity does she have? This is about those individuals, like I just wrote letters to Governor Rendell, who we will have 18,000 less people be able to get LIHEAP, lower income people, oil, the heating oil we provide them each year, because the Harrisburg has yet to release the money that we appropriated down there. Who's fighting for them? And in my mind, too long, we have worried about the establishment. I grew up in a family where my father was an immigrant. 6 kids, my brother, we all went to school, but we always remembered one thing. My father always said, you owe a duty. He was in the Navy, too, to do something for someone else. Well, I served the Navy, yes, this nation, but boy, did it take care of me when my daughter had her illness. And I promise, Sarah, I will work every day like we do in our district and bring that work ethic across Pennsylvania.
We're talking with United States Congressman Joe Sestak right now, and he's going to be with us for about another, 10, 12 minutes or so? And all of my lines are lit. Everybody wants to talk to you, so I'm going to try and get through this as quickly as I can. If it's all right with you, sir, we'll take a couple of phone calls, okay?
Absolutely.
All right, we'll start with Jim. Jim is in Southwest Philadelphia. Good morning, Mr. Jim.
Good morning, young lady, and to that young fellow there.
Hi, Jim. It's Joe, please. Thank you.
Okay, move right along. You mentioned something about, I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but anyway, what I'm calling about is interest-free loans for low-income and seniors. Now, I've spoken to 3 or 4 congressional people recently about this matter. No one has any information pertaining to it, and no one will divulge any information pertaining to it. What's with this? I know that the grant money has been ordered by the feds, but yet still it's not being disseminated to us, and I need to know why.
Sir, here I want you to call this number. And I've got a gentleman who's listening to this. If you would call 610-892-8623, that's my district office. This is the monies, and I want to make sure that we're talking of the same thing first, but I have placed on my website, and I believe you're talking about something that came out of the economic stimulus bill. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
And we have parsed that across the board for seniors, everything that's in it for them. We've parsed it for small businesses. We've parsed it for veterans. But if it isn't that, we will get back to you on it. I would like to give you one other number just as a backup, 610-246-9922, and that's John. If for some reason that the first one, something that call that, and I promise you we will get and divine exactly what you're talking about and get you the information. We do this all the time. What I find is most disturbing about government is they're not accessible. They announce these programs and they don't let people know about. Take this LIHEAP program on lower income getting heating oil. You know, they're going to cut. Harrisburg is cutting those who qualify, instead of for a family of four, of $44,000 income, cutting it to $33,000. They're cutting it down in the savage recession. We're going to have more snowfall this year than in the last 5 years. And yet they haven't disseminated this information to TV stations of how to apply and all that. And so my thing is, that's why we keep our office open 7 days a week. And if you call one of those numbers, we'll take care of and find out what this is about.
All right, Mr. Jim, we thank you for your call. We're going to move on to the Mount Airy section of the city of Philadelphia, where Brother Bruce stands by. Good morning to you, Bruce.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Great, and you?
I want Congressman to realize that we're not being fooled. We know who our inspector was. We know he voted for everything that Bush put in there. He voted for everything that Ronald Reagan destroyed the country, and he was right there with him when voted for him. So I think we realize that the deal was made for him to be that 60th senator. They needed his vote at the time. That's the only reason that the Democrats are pretending that they're supporting him. You got our vote. Don't even worry about it.
Sir, I think you made a good point.
Thanks,
I don't
Bruce.
grudge this president for doing this. I want to be President Obama's strongest ally. And you said it on the money, I think. I just want people to understand that after this May, he is a flight risk. What's going to hold him accountable? And I'm worried about Pennsylvania. We have less than 50% of our children graduating from Philadelphia high schools. I'm on the education committee, and we've got to fix these problems. And so I'm scared about the next 6 years, and we can't afford 36 years of our inspector.
Use that flight risk thing. I like that. All right,
hey, brother.
All right.
Thank you for your call, Bruce. We
Have a
appreciate
great
you.
day.
All right, now, Paul. Paul stands by. He is in Southwest Philadelphia. You have a question or a brief comment for Congressman Sestak?
I'd rather have a brief comment. And hello there. How you doing to radio host and everybody?
Hey.
Joe, I just want to say thank you for when you started the health reform bill for Barack Obama. You was the first man that came to my call at my church and sent the video to help me out when we did the presentation. I'm asking you as a friend and a person that I'm supporting, would you come out to my reenactment Martin Luther King March on the King Day of service?
But now, Paul Earthquake Moore. This is Paul Earthquake Moore, right? Now, look, you got to do it right now. Let me protect the congressman for a minute here. You got to go through his scheduling office because he is in much demand, and 50,000 people are trying to get him to come to their events. So you really can't do this on the radio. That's not fair to the congressman. But it's great to hear that you are supporting him and that he was there in the beginning when you were trying to help people at your church understand the health care reform piece that President Barack Obama presented last year.
Yes. And Paul, yes, make sure you call that number I just gave, 610-892-8623, because I went over the Martin Luther King schedule, and I told them they didn't have enough in it yesterday. and we need to know what time. If I could also say this, I am so proud that in my district, and I filmed this at 10 o'clock on Sunday night, there's a place called the Lanark Diner. Theodore, do you know it? It's in Upper Darby.
I'm not familiar.
Well, I want everyone to know that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had his very first meal in an all-white restaurant or cafe in the Lanark Diner in 1948, and not many people know about it. I did a film on it.
Mm-hmm.
I went to, as was mentioned, I go to another church, mosque, Sikh temple, synagogue, other than my own, every weekend, and I went to the Drexelville Baptist Church. And there's one woman, a white woman who survives the four white couples, that in 1948 went down to Crozier Theological Seminary and picked up a young man they remember fondly as Marty. And he came to a fellowship every Sunday night, and this is what struck my heart so warm, to take care of Navy veterans getting out of Philadelphia Naval Shipyard to help them transition into civilian life. And I'm a Navy vet. Now, in 1948, they decided one night to take him out to dinner to the Lanark Diner. And at first, as I was told the story, he didn't really feel comfortable going in, and he finally told me he'd never been in an all-white cafe or restaurant. And then he finally went in, but they said there's one thing he did before he went in. He went to the telephone booth, put a nickel in it, called back to the theological seminary, and because he knew their meal plan didn't provide for Sunday night dinners, he said, "Do you want me to bring you back some hamburgers or something?" Oh. Even then, Dr. Martin Luther King believed that he had to take care of his other man. And I also will say this, for those four white couples, they followed his lead. And over the years, there was Dr. Martin Luther King and many others of all faiths, of all colors, that held up a national mirror to America and said, we are better than this. And Barack Obama walked that last mile by himself with a lot of us cheering, and that's why America, and that's why he got that award at Oslo, is because America got the award, and he represented that we really are an ideal. We will always become better.
Thank you for sharing that story. That is amazing. That's absolutely amazing. An amazing story indeed. One last caller who wants to connect with you right now real quick, Haraya. She's in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. Hey, Sister Haraya, peace and blessings in this new year.
Happy New Year, Sarah.
Yes.
Happy New Year to Mr. Sestak. Congressman Sestak, I am so glad to hear your voice. I don't know much of you, but I can hear that you have been around for a while. I'm speaking to you representing thousands of black mothers, and this is what the point I want to make, okay? With the crime situation, Mr. Sestak, you would have never been able to make it to where you were at if during your time of coming up in your 20s and 30s, your parents, you said they were immigrants, worked hard, and I know they tore your behind up a little bit to get you to where you're at, okay? If at that time there was a layer of police force that would just lock – now, what nationality are you?
I'm Slovak.
You're Polak.
Slovak. Czechoslovakia.
Right. Suppose there was a layer of police officers, go lock all the Slovaks up, whether they committed a crime or not, and stained your record, prevented you from having a chance to develop a life of self-service. My point, to make it real brief, okay? We cannot, and I'm speaking to you, like I said, from a massive group of black mothers, raise up a culture that will stereotype, and I mean, I worked hard raising my children up and tore behinds up, not for some police force to come by and pretend like they're doing work and cleaning up crime and lock the innocent ones up, leave the criminals out on the street. We cannot build a criminal justice system and prisons up based on this fake and take the good men from our society. I need you to hear me. And, I didn't raise up and revolution, kill all the white folks, this, that, and the other. No, we raised up good young men to serve in this society, and I need you as a congressman and as you go on into the Senate to protect us African-American mothers. And I don't mind saying African-American mothers because we really need help right now. Our main strength and this society's main strength is being threatened right now with all of these false arrests. I don't care whether they're black police officers, black mayors, this, that, and the other. If they're running a corrupt criminal justice system, I have no respect for it. And I need you to put that on your plate as one of the items that you will fight for.
I thank you for sharing.
Thank you. I have spent this last Veterans Day into the state correctional institution, went right inside of it to meet with people, the vets. of all colors. This issue you bring up, I'm carrying with me the urban study the Urban League study they just finished on Philadelphia. We have to understand that we need a different system. For example, drug courts, that we are sweeping people off the streets and throwing them into jail, where if we gave them something, and I'm trying to establish, I just had a meeting this morning. I went to are you familiar with the self-help project in Northeast Philadelphia?
Yes.
I visited there this morning, 8 o'clock, and because I wanted to understand, how are we losing? I mean, I do understand. I see it in the military. We get these men of all colors and women into our military, and they are fabulous, absolutely fabulous. But sometimes a mistake is made, and we sweep them up on something like a drug, and we throw them in and lock them away because we've gone so far overboard on it, rather than let them go to a drug court where potentially we could give them some help, and you'd never see them out there, and we're losing them to society. What you said, ma'am, is an issue, and I'm not just saying this. We have, I call it the incarceration issue, where I started on Veterans Day. We are going to be doing something, and I met today, and we had a brief discussion in this about, who is there, the drug, what can we do to kind of have something else besides just taking them into the criminal system and all, and what can we do to make this be something to where so many men and women are growing up where they have so much less opportunity than, as you just said, my family was fortunate. It was a working family, but we were very fortunate. And I would ask you also, when I have my next event on this, and I think it was going to be in Pittsburgh in 3 weeks, but if not, I'd like to invite you to it because I'm having something on incarceration. And if you would dial that number, 610-892-8623. If I have that one in Philadelphia, I promise to invite you with it. Look, I don't have all the answers. I believe our police try to do very well, but I also know that we are throwing people into jail for crimes that aren't really crimes. They've made a mistake with handling, where on a drug, and instead of rehabilitating or helping them, we're losing them by placing them there. And when I visited that place in correctional institution and talked with the vets there, I then went to the city of Chester to a faith-based ministry and met with 42 people that were in a drug and alcohol rehabilitation. Because the ones I met in jail, some of them were there literally. I remember 4 of them were there because of a drug incident. I'm not talking about a crime where they had a gun or anything. They were picked up vets. They probably had some post-traumatic stress disorder. They got into drugs and use, and all of a sudden they robbed something maybe, but just stole something, and all of a sudden they're in jail. And we lose them to society, and they were good men. I'm sorry to go on in this issue. I'm very aware of it. I'm not just telling you this. My district is what I represent, but I know if I'm going to represent, and I will represent all Pennsylvania, this is an issue because we are not going to be America. By 2040, half our population will be people of color, and we must not be losing them. We must, as I saw in the military, have them be all they can be.
Oh, man, I wish we had more time, but I know that, I'm believing that between you and your staff, that you all will find some more time for this radio station and our listeners, be it my show, Bill Anderson's show, Reggie Bryant's show, some of the other programs, Al Butler, that we're going to get Joe Sestak's voice on time and time again. Equally, we will reach out to the opponent to give them some fair time on the air as well as we come towards the primary election in the spring of 2010. Congressman, I see that you're going to be the keynote speaker for Cheney University Alumni Chapter, Delaware County, in their annual Martin Luther King Scholarship Gala coming up on Saturday, January the 16th. We will be telling our listening audience about this. In fact, we're going to put it on our station website along with a whole lot of other new announcements for this new year and for this month of January to let people know where they can plug in and hear from Congressman Joe Sestak. I thank you, sir, so much for your time. And if there were one thing I could ask of you, I dare to ask this question. As you campaign, I hope that you and your political gurus will relook at that spot, that commercial television spot you did when you were running for Congress, where you had all of your Navy guys stand up and salute you. I hope you run that spot again and just change it for U.S. Senate from U.S. Congress, because I love that spot.
Well, Sarah, thank you, and thank you for this. Look, if anybody who I asked to call, somehow some didn't copy the number right, or we dropped the ball, can they call your station, make sure they get me?
Absolutely.
The
Absolutely.
thing I'm running on is accountability. If I say something, I don't want to be responsible. I want to be accountable for what I said. And second, on Cheney, if I could, I have visited Cheney about 15 times since I've been a congressman. What a wonderful university. But remember, when Ed Bradley went there, and I went to his memorial service there right after I was elected 3 years ago, I was so impressed with his class who came back. But that was when those who were African Americans had almost nowhere else to go, the 60s. And now that they have more opportunity, we have only 32% of our youth going to Cheney, matriculating over the years. And that's why I keep going back out to Cheney and back out to Cheney and back out to Cheney. They have a wonderful new president, as you know, arrived 3 years ago, a year and a half ago. And I want Cheney to be the crown jewel in our statewide institutions. And I'm very honored that they're having me out there for that evening. And thank you. I promise you to be working even harder as senator. And I just thank you very much for having me aboard today.
Congressman, thank you so much. Oh, I have about another 20 questions, but I have to hold them till next time. You be safe, travel carefully, and we just pray for you to have safe traveling mercies as you pop all across the state and still run back and forth to Washington to do your congressperson's job until such time as you move to the next level.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a great
Congressman.
day.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye-bye. Happy New Year to you and to your family.